My name is Sarah Grimm, and my book today is Imprisoned, The Betrayal of Japanese Americans During World War II by Martin W. Sandler. What were you taught in your history classes about America in World War II? Did your textbooks include that over 100,000 Japanese Americans were forced into relocation camps? I know mine didn't. But after reading Imprisoned, I got a great insight on what actually took place in America during that time. The book talks about how after Pearl Harbor and the attack, that many Americans did not feel safe with living amongst other Japanese Americans. They feared that they would attack and that they could not be trusted. So after a while, government decided that in order for their citizens to feel safe, that they needed to place these Japanese Americans into a camp. And so they did. These Japanese Americans were forced to give up their homes and businesses and to move with only the things that they could carry. At first, these relocation camps were not completely built, so Japanese Americans were forced to live in fairgrounds, stables, racetracks, in very unkempt conditions. They had mass rooms for showers. Japanese Americans talked about having to stand for hours in line just in order to receive a meal. And then once they were relocated into these camps, it talks about the very harsh conditions these camps were built in. They were built out in the middle of the desert where it was so hot during the day, and just the sand and the dust just made for the conditions to be very hard to live in. When it did rain, the sand and dust would turn into mud, and it made it really hard for them to live in these conditions. But after a while, the Japanese Americans came together and started to plant crops, have schools, began to create jobs in their little communities, and it became a great time. And then once the war was over, these families were forced to move back to where they came from. Many did not know what would become of their lives. They had worked so hard before, creating great lives and having a home and a job, and now they were forced to start all over again. And so once they were forced to leave these camps, there was a lot of uncertainty among these families. This book is a great reminder for what did happen in America during this time and can really teach a lot of valuable lessons. When studying the World War II, I think some great activities would be to read this book and to include it when you're learning about Germany, when you're learning about the Holocaust, and creating activities for students to relate what went on in America as to what went on in Germany, and making sure that something like this never happens again. An award this book has won is it was a 2014 finalist for the YALSA nonfiction for young adults. And one of my favorite quotes from this story talks about, in fact, I think a lot of people back east never knew this even happened. I know I didn't really know anything about this part of our history of the United States, and it sounds like that many people back east didn't even know that these events took place during the time of World War II. So if you want to get more insight on a little bit of U.S. history, then I highly recommend reading Imprisoned. Thanks.